Hello, everybody. This video is going to be a bit different. This a bit experimental. Thought I'd give a bit of a touch of my personal life in the form of a weekly blog or periodic blog. It's at the very least. Anyway, the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm hope taking this approach will be helpful to autism advocacy on this channel and. But it means I'll also be speaking about other topics as well because it's going to be again a bit of a personal touch, so it's going to be different than a lot of my other videos that have been present. So I'm going to talk about how my life went the week. Each episode it talks about, but because I can't talk about stuff that hasn't happened yet. My work week is Monday through Sunday. I essentially, for the purposes of these videos, considered Monday the first day of a new week. With that said, I guess I'll get started in the first episode. Since I work mid-shift dairy at a grocery store and I'm a backup call for the check stand, holidays in general, especially Thanksgiving, aren't pleasant for me, and that's generally where this first episode is starting. So this after the holiday, of course, I had stuff to catch up on, so that's why this video is it's somewhat late, but anyway. So the good news is I'm not in the check stands as much as I used to be. The bad news is that there's still a lot of additional stress that I'd rather not have. Used to be opening dairy and would rather have stayed opening dairy, but long story short, that changed for reasons a bit out of my control, which I may perhaps go into detail about in a future video. But once again, I'm starting this first episode on the week of Thanksgiving, so really it's. So again, this episode's somewhat late. At Monday was not exactly off to a very encouraging start. Now, I said Monday would be the first day of a new week on this video series, but to understand the context, I need to go back to Sunday. I was off that Saturday, so when I came in Sunday morning at the start of my shift, much to my shock and horror, my load that was scheduled for the prior day never came in at all. Now, it wouldn't have surprised me if it came in late, as late loads have been a problem for years in my particular company, with this being more likely than on holiday weeks due to traffic and of course drunken idiots on the road. Of course, there have been times they forgot to deliver eggs, and I was able to catch them in time to get them delivered the next day. Of course, that's just one part of said load, albeit an important one. But I've never in the entire 16 years I've been employed with that company ever seen anything like this. Now, I checked the computer to see if the order sent, you know, for Saturday, the order Friday for Saturday was actually sent. Orders are sent the day before the load drives. So I checked the invoices dated for the prior day and didn't find any for Saturday, but did find an invoice for everything that was supposed to show up on Saturday dated for Sunday. So my store manager was off, so I told my assistant, as he usually is on Sunday, so I told my assistant manager as well as the opening dairy clerk about the invoice. My assistant manager called dispatch, and apparently dispatch said there was no load to be delivered on Sunday because, well, there usually isn't under normal circumstances. So it's a classic case of the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. But anyway, this was, of course, an unusual circumstance. Fast forward 10 minutes before I'm scheduled to go home, and a truck pulls up, and the phantom load dispatch set would never come arrived, yet my store was still billed for. And I'm not going to use real names here, but the first letter of their name, so R was supposed to be off on Monday, came in that day along with me, of course, as well as H. It was all both scheduled that day, so all three of us probably worked through 700 something cases worth of product between these two loads, probably around 1,000 if you include all the repack. Now, I was in the check stands once that day, and it was to let someone out for their 10-minute break. That was sort of the good thing about that day. Of course, once the initial stress of the very extreme circumstance was over, and I knew there wouldn't be similar shenanigans with that Monday's load, the rest of the day was not too bad, actually. It was still a surprise and not a welcome one, though. According to Our receiver, apparently a lot of the old timers at the warehouse retired, and we're left with a lot of people that don't really know what they're doing. I was initially frightened that this would happen again, but it actually hasn't, thankfully. Tuesday was much less eventful. I was off that day, so I mostly rested to get ready for Wednesday, which was a big day. And I basically chilled out at home, played some Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. It's maybe I'll go into more detail about that in future videos. But like Monday, everyone in my department was present on Wednesday. Unlike Monday, it was scheduled that way. We didn't have anyone have to come in on their day off. So my shift was 1 to 10, which was the latest shift I'd done in months. So wasn't exactly looking forward to it. Truck pulled up shortly after I clocked in. Load was nearly 700 cases, which wasn't surprising considering it was the day before the busiest holiday of the entire year, and it's practically the law for our loads to be late under those circumstances. Of course, that's probably one of the main reasons my managers scheduled me so late. Unfortunately, the crowds were so large I had to contort myself into a pretzel as I struggled to work around the customers who grabbed everything in sight as I tried to fill the items they wanted most. Normally, this would be a mere annoyance, but I had to move in ways that were so awkward to my body that it ended up aggravating my bad knee to the point where it seemed like I had no choice but to go home early. Of course, after speaking to my manager, he sent me to my lunch early, like 2.5 hours into my shift, in the hopes that me resting would help me regain enough strength to stay. Thankfully, it worked. While I was on my lunch, I ate some turkey management provided in the break room, and as much as I appreciated whoever cooked it, most likely someone in the service deli overcooked it because it was a tad dry. Of course, just because I was strong enough to continue working didn't mean I was completely healed. I spent it wondering how much longer I could hold out. Luckily, when I did come back for my lunch, the most physically demanding work was already done, and the crowds were much more manageable. Which was a good thing considering how weak I was. I did leave early that night by about 5 minutes, which isn't too big of a deal, really. I was off on Thanksgiving Day thanks to it being a triple time holiday and me having considerably more seniority than H and R, who both worked that day. They didn't really order that much for Thanksgiving Day, less than 200 cases. Technically, Wednesday is supposed to be a 1 day load and Thursday a 2 day, but we usually switch it around anyway because it's easier for reasons I'll explain in a bit. So my brother flew out from Oregon. He was originally supposed to come in that prior night, but had to reschedule because he had to finish up some things from work before he left, so he came in around Wednesday afternoon. Of course, I was so exhausted, both due to the work itself and the stress and sensory overload from the past week or so, that I was completely out of it for the entire day. Could barely walk, yet somehow hid it from my mom and my brother. Though they knew I was exhausted, I couldn't hide that from them. Luckily, it was at my house, and I didn't really have to drive anywhere. So, hooray for that, at least. Luckily, they handled the preparations for Thanksgiving dinner, though honestly, part of me felt a bit guilty for not doing anything. The plans were to cook breakfast that morning to tide us over till dinner time, but we ordered breakfast burritos on DoorDash instead, and it was the first time in 5 years that my brother visited for Thanksgiving, due in large part to work related reasons. And it was the first time in 2 years that he had turkey. I guess the last 2 years he had salmon because his girlfriend at the time who he spent Thanksgiving with didn't really like turkey. So while I was in La La Land most of the time, I still enjoyed my brother's company and liked seeing him be so enthusiastic about the entire holiday. The past few Thanksgivings, in my case, were mostly just me and my mom, partly due to me working, and partly due to me usually being completely exhausted, and partly due to much of my family either being dead, living far away, or being estranged, unfortunately. At least that's the case for my mom's side of the family. My dad's side of the family is much more intact, though they had a few challenges of their own. That and me working retail merely makes me have conflicted feelings about holidays. These feelings aren't as intense on Thanksgiving as they are for Christmas, but are, of course, still present. Of course, due to R having to come in on his day off, I was by myself on Friday morning. My 8 to 5 shift turned into a 6 to 3 shift, which would have been a tad better if I'd slept better the night before, though I blame that on the 1 to 10 screwing up my sleep schedule. For that day, it was in Monster low carb energy drink. I trusted. Not good for me, I know, but it was a bit of a necessary evil. Usually, the day after Thanksgiving, everything looks like total crap, but to my pleasant surprise, everything actually looked great. For the most part. Of course, since it's grocery retail and not regular retail, the store was deader than a doornail. People who aren't sleeping off their food comas, nursing off hangovers, or both were busy killing each other for so-called deals at places like Walmart and Target, or rather at least the ones who had a few points off their IQ. Of course, when I first clocked in, my milk load was just delivered. The reason why I specify milk load is because milk loads they get the VIP treatment and get in a separate truck from the rest of the stuff that is part of my department, which we call the combo load, which is delivered basically along with the meat department, service deli, produce, and bakery loads, as well as frozen, which is they open up another hatch for right after that stuff is delivered. It'd be a lot easier if the combo load came in early like the milk loads do, but, well, we can't always be that lucky now, can we? Friday's milk load's a 3-day milk load, making it the largest milk load of the entire week, which is, of course, why we make Thursday's combo load order light. Thankfully, there's no combo load scheduled for Fridays. My knee wasn't fully recovered from Wednesday, but still felt a bit better. So I was unable to move as quickly as I normally was able to, and breaking down the milk load was the most physically demanding part of the day. I can usually break down and count a Friday milk load in about an hour or so. Afterwards, I'll write the order for the next milk load. Orders for milk need to be written 2 days in advance, 3 if the milk order is being written for Monday, which it was in this case. My assistant manager told me that R already wrote the combo load order for Saturday, so that gave me one less thing to worry about, though I wouldn't have had too many problems writing that if I had to. Of course, normally I'm a bit annoyed when they do that sort of thing, but in this case, I honestly didn't really care. Despite having to be so careful, Friday was actually a fairly easy day, easiest of my entire week. When I got home, it was back to resting, and I was playing Super Mario RPG Remake, which I had just bought. It's one of those games that I will never get tired of, no matter how many times I've played it over the years. So I had turkey leftovers twice that day. Once on my lunch break at work, once more when I got home. Got a good night's sleep Friday night, but I still felt a bit tired on Saturday. Even so, though, Saturday was still not too bad, despite the load coming late. R and I got the entire load done with a little help from store manager S, who wanted everything to look good because some higher-ups were coming in. Sunday, the other hand, was the most craptacular day of not only the week, but that entire month. We were already working with a skeleton crew because the rest of the holiday weekend tended to be fairly dead, but this doesn't tend to have a negative effect. The only reason it did this time was because 2 people called out sick, which resulted in me being stuck in the check stands for most of the first half of my shift, and some constant back and forth on this second half of my shift. Which itself is frustrating due to me having to constantly shift my brain between the two very different skill sets, which really messes with my focus. I detest the check stands because they're hard on my knee, thanks to years of work-related knee injuries. My knee still not being fully healed from Wednesday made a bad situation that much worse. Honestly, from a medical standpoint, I can't really do this for much longer, though my escape is getting closer, as I will explain a bit more in the next episode here, which probably won't be as long as this one. Of course, even if my bad knee wasn't a factor, the check stands are a major trigger for my sensory issues, so I have to disassociate by shutting off parts of my brain to minimize the sensory overload to protect myself, which often causes me to come off as cold and distant to customers. Despite this, I came into work the following Monday. As for how that went, Well, you'll have to hear about that in the next episode.